you think is better driving, men or women?
Women don't know how to drive.
Men. I think men.
Man is more better.
I think men. Men are better.
I think men.
Man.
I think men.
I explained to you, Captain, women cannot drive!
Sexism is not a new concept. It's been around for a long period of time. Traffic isn't immune to sexism either. However, women drivers are harassed all the time and everywhere, whether they're in traffic, at school, at home, at work, in the news, or even on social media. When it comes to a woman's driver's habits, knowledge, talents, and intrinsic capabilities, many people mysteriously become authorities. And this is nothing more than sexism, which restricts women's freedom of transit, lowers women's perceived self-efficacy, and increases harassment in traffic. Furthermore, this gendered traffic structure results in inflated, overly enthusiastic, false self-assessment of driving capabilities in men, which has been demonstrated to be a primary cause of the accident involvement in the first place. This documentary attempts to explore sexism in traffic from a social psychological standpoint through a thorough assessment of the research.
This sexism against women is still an issue that persists into the 21st century. Take Saudi Arabia as an example. Until June of 2018, the country has prohibited women from driving. Despite their losses, Saudi women continue to fight for their rights through a campaign in support of their freedom to drive. It was called the Women to Drive movement.
Women in Saudi Arabia are finally getting behind the wheel.
It has been issued in Saudi Arabia, giving women the right to drive.
Activists pushing for change on social media say they've been gaining ground.
After rejecting our petition 4 times for women driving, they finally accepted it last February.
It all started in 1990 when dozens of women drove wonderfully in Riyadh only to be arrested and have their passports taken. This was the case until 2018 when they were finally granted the rights they deserved.
I have firsthand seen so many women in my neighborhood, close friends, and acquaintances converse about how ecstatic and empowered they feel to have the right to drive in Saudi.
However, the sexism did not stop there. Any tiny delay on the road caused by a woman, the common remark, "This is why we should have never permitted them to drive," culminated in major dramatic problems.
طيب كيف تعطى المرأة ما عندها إلا نصف؟ ليش المرور؟ طيب وإذا خرجت.
We have partnered with a psychology expert named Dr. Afnan.
My name is Afnan Boutreed, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Humanities at the University of Wollongong here in Dubai.
Teaching psychology to many youngsters who also happens to have a strong opinion on this misconception. Dr. Afnan will be justifying and explaining the root of the problem and the mindset behind this misconception.
Women should be allowed to drive. It's a good thing, but not in every aspect, like not at every time of the day, especially not on highways, because as you know, highways, like the speed is very high, and I don't think women will be able to tolerate that and handle the car. Sometimes stuff happens very suddenly, like someone might get into an accident and they can't dodge the accident. For me, men have quick reflexes and will be able to do so. Okay, I know for a fact it's men, but I think it happens because of women.
And so from such a young age, we start socializing children into these very gendered roles, as women are the caretakers, women stay at home, and then men take on these more outward-looking, more analytical, logical roles. And we see this trickle down into the STEM field. And so when we look at numbers of enrollment of females versus males in the STEM field, they're still staggeringly high towards the male preference than the females. And a lot of studies go back to gendered toys, and we find that this has a huge impact on children that later will then impact them as young adults. And that if constantly a girl is playing with a doll and not using building blocks, for example, then she's not going to build that logical, mechanical skills, whereas the boy will.
From a personal experience, me and my friends, we never go to a side of the road that women be driving in, because women get distracted very easily. they make sudden movements with the car. One time I saw a woman doing her makeup on the highway, not on the highway, on the normal road. She was doing her makeup while driving. So I think men do the most accidents, but because of women. I think that they're not in their right mind to drive, you know?
Okay.
They can drive, not at all times. Like sometimes they're just too pressured and they forget that they're driving and they make accidents and make bad stuff happen.
And so I am a strong proponent of getting rid of those gendered roles when it comes to toys, because again, it comes from a socio-cultural perspective, right? It's not based on our nature that blocks are for boys and the ironing board is for the girl, right? That's something that we're socialized to believe.
Why do many people still think that men are better drivers than women?
So coming from a socio-cultural perspective, we're socialized to believe that men are better drivers, and that the more we see men in this role, the more we believe that this role is reserved for men. A lot of times we hear stereotypes against women being bad drivers, and the more we hear that stereotype, the more it's reinforced. And so once again, coming from the perspective of neuroplasticity, the more we hear these things, the more our brain is wired to believe that they're true. So when you see a stereotype and you constantly see that stereotype being reinforced, it ends up becoming almost like truth in your mind, whereas it's not truth in reality.
I would definitely say there is a stereotype. A lot of people would possibly think that, but I don't necessarily think it's true. However, I would definitely say that there is a difference in some parts of driving when it comes to women and men.
A lot of times in our society, we're taught these things, right? Based off of the images that we see, the video clips we watch, the media that we're exposed to. We're constantly surrounded by these messages that men are better drivers than women. But statistically speaking, that's not true.
I guess women could get in more accidents, typically because of the thought process that they have. They tend to consider a lot of things. They like to look at the finer details and things that a lot of us men don't notice.
So when you look worldwide at who has more traffic incidences, who has more speeding tickets, who has more traffic violations, it's always men at a much higher rate than women.
This misconception doesn't stop at just women driving. It carries on to the entire field of automobiles.
My name is Aisha, and currently I'm working as a junior technician in a classic car garage. For my experience, I've been in the industry for about 3 years. I wanted to apply to another company. I applied for the same position, vehicle inspector, but it has slightly different responsibilities. Coincidentally, it was a lady on call, and she thought that I sent my resume in by mistake. She's like, is this Aisha speaking? Like, yeah. Like, are you a vehicle inspector? I'm like, yes, I am. And she said, are you sure? What do you mean I'm sure? Because, I mean to ask, what do you do as an inspector? I explained her my duties, like checking the condition of the car, engine, transmission test drives, so forth. And then she's like, oh, okay, let me call you back. She never called me back. So after a week, I called her up. She's like, no. We're not looking for any females at the moment. I just wanted to call you and double check that, you didn't send your resume in by mistake, because it's a guy's field and only guys are working here. So it won't be, I don't think this is a job for you. And then she just cut the call before I could explain myself.
So in the field of psychology, there's always this ongoing battle of an argument between nature versus nurture. And so nature is what you're biologically born to do. And so what are you born with? Whereas nurture is what you're socialized to be. And so your social-cultural context is really important in shaping who you become as a person. And so nowadays we argue a lot more for nature versus nurture when it comes to thinking about gendered roles. And what that means is that these roles are not naturally occurring in men and as a gender from a biological perspective, from a natural perspective, but rather they've been socialized to believe that these roles should be reserved for men. You can rewire your brain. So the more your brain sees this connection between a man being a driver, the stronger that connection becomes in your actual physical brain. And so nowadays we start to see women taking on these roles, and so we're starting to rewire our brains and what we believe women are able to do, and that it's not from a natural perspective but rather from a social cultural perspective based off of our society and social norms that create these gendered norms when it comes to specific career paths or specific career positions.
Pinkwashing is a term coined to describe the action of using many related issues, in this case feminism, in positive ways in order to distract attention from the negative actions by an organization, country, or even the government. Here in Dubai, we've recently discovered a new concept called the pink taxis. Pink taxis are reserved exclusively for female drivers. For many years, women were not permitted to drive taxis due to the widespread belief that they were unfit to do so because of their gender. Following several concerns from younger Muslim female residents about their safety, the UAE ultimately allowed women to become cab drivers. When one sees a pink taxi, they often regard it as a step forward against sexism, but never for the fact that this was only permitted due to safety concerns from men, never because gender plays no role in driving. This is due to the fact that this misconception persists to this day, even in the UAE.
This brings our documentary Let Women Drive to an end.
When we say let women drive, we mean more than just allowing them to get behind the wheel. We mean let them drive with peace, without discrimination, and especially without the misconception that we would never be as good as a man.
Let them work in the field and learn to assist rather than discriminate when wrong.
Remember that it's the 21st century, and to
let us drive. Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.
Let us drive.